Claire Moreau had learned how to maintain a calm exterior like a thin layer of ice covering a lake in winter. Years of working in strategic consulting in Paris, where fake handshakes and empty promises were daily routines, had taught her that composure was power. But that day, as Claire settled into seat 14C on her flight from Nice to Frankfurt, she felt that ice began to crack in a troubling way. "Excuse me," came a woman's voice from behind, sharp and metallic. "The window seat is for my daughter. Would you mind switching?" Claire looked up. A woman in her early 40s stood there, her perfectly curled blonde hair framing a face partly hidden by a pair of Chanel sunglasses, worn indoors, no less. One hand rested protectively on the shoulder of a girl around 8 years old who clung to her mother and kept her eyes on the floor. Claire responded gently, "I'm sorry, but this is the seat I reserved. I chose it because I need the extra legroom." The woman frowned, her gaze sweeping over Claire from her neatly pinned hair and sharp navy blue suit to the open laptop on her tray table. There was something in that look that made Claire shiver, an unspoken judgment and dismissal she had grown used to facing in all-male executive boards. The woman lowered her voice, but not enough to keep nearby passengers from hearing. "My daughter is very afraid of flying. She needs to sit by the window to feel safe. I'm sure you understand." Claire didn't answer right away. She recognized this kind of emotional appeal. She also knew that her own rights as a brown-skinned woman from Marseille working in German finance were often weighed against the legitimate needs of others. "Ma'am, my seat is 14C. I have no reason to move. Your daughter's seat is the one you booked, not mine." The woman's face flushed. "I'll call the flight attendant." "Please do." Claire turned back to her laptop. Her strategic presentation for tomorrow's client meeting was still waiting for final touches. She could feel the eyes of nearby passengers. An elderly man in 14D gave her a small nod, his faint smile a silent gesture of solidarity, something familiar yet rarely expressed aloud. A few minutes later, the firm steps of a flight attendant approached. Blonde hair tied up high, her name, Helena, was neatly printed on the tag pinned to her uniform. Her smile was professional. "Is there a problem here?" Helena asked, glancing between the two women. The mother spoke first. "I'm Anna Weiss. My daughter needs the window seat, but this lady refuses to switch." Helena checked her tablet. "Ms. Weiss, you and your daughter are assigned to row 23, seats A and B. This seat belongs to Ms. Moreau, 14C. Anna waved a hand dismissively. "I told the booking agent my daughter needed special seating." Helena's tone remained patient. "Such needs have to be specified at the time of booking. I'm very sorry, but Ms. Moreau has the right to keep her seat." Claire stayed silent. But inside her, a quiet battle had already begun. Anna scowled. "I'll keep this in mind the next time I choose an airline." As Anna walked away with her daughter, Helena turned to Claire. "Are you all right?" Claire nodded. "Thank you for handling it fairly." Helena gave a soft smile. "We're trained to respect all passengers, even the ones who aren't young and afraid of heights." Claire smiled for the first time that day. But the smile hadn't fully formed when a man's voice to her right said, "Excuse me, I have the middle seat." A man in a plain white shirt, early 30s, extended a hand. "Matteo Klein." "Claire Moreau." She shook his hand, still feeling a faint unease from the earlier encounter. "That situation, you handled it with real composure," Matteo said. Claire shrugged. "It's not the first time. And probably won't be the last." Matteo smiled. "I work in HR for a tech company in Frankfurt. We're rolling out a team diversity initiative. Ring any bells?" Claire looked at him more closely. There was something familiar. "As for me," she replied, "I'm presenting to a bank tomorrow. Topic, diversity and inclusion strategy." "In that case," Matteo tilted his head, "let's save the world one PowerPoint at a time." Claire laughed. Above the clouds, the plane gradually ascended into the sky. And in row 14, two strangers began a conversation that seemed coincidental but would go on to change everything: their careers, their perspectives, and perhaps even their lives. Claire stood in front of the Volcker and Strauss Bank building, a 48-story glass and concrete tower, stark and unwelcoming in the heart of Frankfurt's financial district. Inside, every detail, from the pale gray carpeting to the sterile white ceiling lights, seemed designed to make people feel small. The glass elevator shot upward, taking Claire to the 47th floor, where she would present her proposal, comprehensive diversity and inclusion strategy, to the senior leadership board. She had stood before executive boards before, but this time was different. Not because of the stakes, but because of the woman seated at the far end of the table. Anna Weiss, Senior HR Director. the same Chanel sunglasses-wearing mother who had tried to pressure Claire into switching airplane seats, now sitting at the head of the table in a burgundy suit, legs crossed, eyes colder than any piece of decor in the entire building. As Claire entered, an assistant introduced her to the board. Claire Moreau, independent consultant from Paris. She designed the HR transformation model for Banque Suisse Européenne last year. Anna Weiss showed no reaction. No greeting. Not even a nod. Richard Volker, the CEO, a silver-haired man with a demeanor more open than expected, stood and shook Claire's hand. We've reviewed the initial proposal. We're looking forward to hearing the full presentation. Claire gave a faint smile, opened her laptop, connected it to the large display, and spoke with a clear, unhurried voice. Thank you for your time. Today, I'll be presenting an integrated approach to a challenge all major organizations are facing: how to make diversity not just a number, but a culture. The slides began: comparative data, organizational behavior models, excerpts from in-depth research studies. Initial reactions were positive. A few members nodded, asking strategic questions about implementation timelines and performance metrics. Only Anna remained silent. Until Claire moved into the sensitive section: internal recruitment mechanisms and the imbalance in advancement opportunities among minority groups, particularly women of color, immigrants, and LGBTQ+ employees. Anna looked up. I have a question, she said evenly. Are you implying that Volker and Strauss currently lack structural diversity? Claire met her gaze. I'm not making an implication. I'm presenting data. And according to the internal figures I was given, there's a significant gap between the percentage of ethnically diverse staff at entry level and those in mid to senior level management. Anna smiled for the first time. But the smile was velvet-wrapped steel. Data can be misleading. In many cases, that gap reflects differences in capability and experience, not bias. Claire didn't take the bait. True. Which is why my model includes skills development and transparent career path planning to eliminate that excuse in a data-driven way. A voice from across the table interjected: Friedrich Bauer, head of strategy, I like how you tie data to actionable solutions. Especially the mentoring and 360-degree feedback components. Very grounded. Richard Volker nodded. I'd like to see the Phase 1 implementation roadmap, assuming we proceed. Claire switched to the next slide, a 3-month rollout plan detailing each step and department involved. Anna sat quietly, but her eyes scanned each board member, assessing their expressions like a chess player reading 5 moves ahead. The presentation ended with polite applause, rare in meetings of this level. Richard shook Claire's hand again. We'll provide formal feedback later this week. But personally, I think this is a direction worth exploring. As the board members rose and began to leave, Claire packed up her laptop. Anna approached. Small world, Ms. Moreau. From seat 14C to the 47th floor of Volker. Claire looked her straight in the eye. And I still see no reason to switch positions. Anna gave a slight smile. Don't think I let personal history affect my professional judgment. I'm quite good at separating the two. Claire replied, voice soft as breath. The issue is many people think they are when they're not. Anna walked away without looking back. Claire watched her go, not shaken, only quietly activating a new layer of strategy in her mind. If Anna Weiss was the gatekeeper to this proposal, Claire would need allies on the board. And perhaps she'd need to turn a rival into an ally or neutralize her with the right move. She stepped into the elevator. Her phone buzzed. A message from Matteo Klein. How did the meeting go? Did you win? Claire smiled, her fingers typing lightly. Round 1's over. Still in the ring. She slipped her phone away, reminding herself inclusion strategy isn't just in PowerPoint slides, it's in how she reads the room, builds alliances, and redefines power in spaces never meant for her. The next morning, Frankfurt lay under a fine mist, like a silk curtain draped over a stage before the show begins. Claire stood by the hotel window, a cup of black coffee in hand, eyes following the slow crawl of traffic through the intersections below. On her phone screen, Richard Volker's message, the CEO of the bank, still lingered. We're very impressed. Our COO will be in touch to discuss next steps. Claire took a deep breath, set down her cup, and turned away from the window. A new day and a new campaign. The early phase of any transformation project is always the most fragile. No real power yet, but already under scrutiny. At Volker and Strauss, not everyone wanted change. Not everyone believed diversity and inclusion were priorities. And worse, some feared it might erode their place in the hierarchy. After yesterday's meeting, Claire knew she had to act quickly. Before alliances hardened, she needed to identify potential allies. Her first pick, Julian Becker, deputy head of investment and risk. Not because he had said much, he hadn't, but precisely because he hadn't said a word, and yet observed every detail of the presentation. People like that often stay quiet to listen, and are often the ones worth listening to. They met at a cafe called Klein und Fein, small and discreet, tucked into a cobbled corner near West End. Claire arrived early, chose a corner table, and ordered a cappuccino. When Julian walked in, he wore a plain charcoal coat, hair casually swept back with a touch of defiance, but his eyes were sharp, alert. He didn't bother with small talk. The moment he sat down, he said bluntly, "You know who you've just provoked, don't you?" Claire raised an eyebrow, then smiled faintly. "I'm guessing, Ms. Weiss." Julian took a sip of his espresso. "It's not exactly a provocation, but let me put it this way. Anna Weiss isn't used to being put on the defensive. She spent 8 years building the entire HR infrastructure here like her own fortress. You just drove a bulldozer through its foundation." Claire didn't flinch. "I spoke the truth, and I offered a solution. If the truth makes someone uncomfortable, perhaps the question they should ask is of themselves, not of me." Julian leaned back, amusement flickering in his gaze. "That kind of logic will win you favor with the board, but it'll get you blindsided by the middle layers. That's why I'm here with you. I need to understand the real power structure. Not the org chart, the influence chart." Claire pulled a blank sheet of paper from her pocket. "Draw it for me." Julian chuckled, quietly but genuinely. "You're more direct than I expected." "I don't have time for detours," Claire replied. Julian took a pen. On the table between them, a diagram began to take shape in swift, confident strokes. Anna at the center of the HR network with 3 regional managers beneath her. Another branch linked to the legal department, clearly a source of allies. Then Julian circled 3 other names. "This group I call the different thinkers. Not revolutionaries, but they're tired of the current system. I'm one of them." Claire studied him for a long moment. "And why do you think I could shift the balance?" "Because you don't flatter anyone. And because Anna doesn't like you," Julian said, smirking. "If she sees you as a threat, you're probably doing something right." Claire folded the paper and slipped it into her coat. "Thanks. But remember, winning on slides is one thing. Winning in hallways is another. I'll need your help reaching the people who hate meetings but love elevator gossip." Julian nodded. "I'll make some introductions." The meeting lasted just 30 minutes, but Claire left the cafe as if she'd just been handed a map to the center of a maze. The faces from yesterday's meeting now took clearer shape in her mind. Who had spoken, who had stayed silent, and who was watching to see which side would gain ground. That afternoon, back at her hotel, she received an email from an unexpected sender. From Elizabeth Kramer, Chief Operating Officer. Subject: "A coffee. Off the record?" Body: "Claire, I believe we need a private conversation. Not in the office. No assistants. No minutes. Just 2 women who understand how this system works and what it hides. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., Café Sizemore. Best, E." Claire read it 3 times. No explicit endorsement. No rejection either. But any senior executive requesting an off-the-record coffee was someone who knew more than they let on. That evening, light rain fell as Claire stepped into an Italian restaurant on Schweitzer Street. Matteo was already there, a glass of white wine in hand, his gaze soft. He stood to pull out her chair, saying nothing, asking nothing. "Rough day?" he asked, half joking, half curious. "Not many battles," Claire said, leaning back in her chair as she shrugged off her coat. "But every strike was precise. I'm coordinating a campaign, with shadow players, friendly factions, and a few swing votes in the mix." Matteo chuckled. "I thought you were a diversity consultant, not a secret agent." Claire tilted her head, smiling. "You're mistaken. Consulting for corporations is a lot closer to intelligence work than you'd think. The only difference is, I don't carry a gun. I carry data. They ordered their meals, and by unspoken agreement, left work behind. The conversation drifted to lighter things. The legendary lasagna from a tiny restaurant in Milan, the time Matteo was stranded at Istanbul airport for 22 hours, and Claire as a child, the little girl who spent recess in the library to avoid hearing classmates mock her mother's French-African accent. By the time they left the restaurant, the rain had softened. Now just a gentle patter, turning every raindrop's landing into a quiet, rhythmic sound on the pavement. Consultant Claire Moreau, Matteo said as they stood under the awning, waiting for a taxi. If you're not too busy leading an organizational revolution, I'd like to take you to a proper dinner. Next time I'm in Frankfurt. Claire looked at him, her gaze no longer guarded like the night before. I'll be here all month, and I'm not great at turning down good things. Matteo smiled. So that's a promise? A promise on condition of a supporting strategy. Understood. I'll bring a full action plan. The taxi pulled up. Matteo opened the door for her, but as she stepped in, he lightly touched her arm. A small, genuine gesture, as if to say, I understand, and I'll wait. As the car pulled away, Claire leaned back, watching the raindrops slide across the window glass. The campaign had begun. Allies were forming, and the opposition, perhaps it wasn't as solitary as she once believed. Tomorrow morning, she would meet with Elizabeth Kramer, and perhaps behind those closed doors, for the first time, a powerful woman would finally speak the truth. Siesmayer Café was nestled within the grounds of the Stadel Museum, a refuge where Frankfurt's residents escaped the city's relentless financial tempo. The space blended art and serenity, high ceilings, golden lighting, and the gentle clinking of spoons against porcelain like glass wind chimes whispering in the air. Claire arrived early. She chose a table by the window overlooking the sculpture garden, still damp from the rain. The trees outside were saturated, deep green, and heavy. She ordered an espresso but didn't touch it, her hands loosely interlaced in her lap as if testing her own readiness. At 5 to 8, Elizabeth Kramer entered, just as Claire had imagined her. A long dark brown coat, a neatly tied gray silk scarf, short silver hair cut with the elegance of a final period in a well-written sentence. No assistant. No documents. No iPad. Only a soft leather handbag at her wrist and an observant gaze that moved slowly as if each detail of the room needed to be felt before sitting down. Thank you for coming, Elizabeth said, her voice low and lightly husky, like a cello solo opening an unfinished symphony. Thank you for the invitation, Claire replied, smiling just enough, no more, no less. The server brought their coffees. Elizabeth didn't drink. She looked directly at Claire, no hesitation. I want to speak without roles. Not a COO and consultant. Just two women who've both stood before rooms full of men who believed they didn't need us. Claire raised an eyebrow slightly. An unusual opening. I heard your presentation was strong, Elizabeth continued. Richard was impressed. And Julian Becker, he texted me at midnight, saying that not working with you would be a missed opportunity. Claire didn't respond, other than with a small nod. She was waiting for the real reason they were here. Elizabeth set down her spoon and folded her arms. But I also know Anna Weiss won't step aside. Not because of you, but because of the space your program threatens to displace. Claire sat up straighter, drawing a breath. I'm not trying to displace anyone. I'm trying to move the organization forward. And that, Elizabeth said, without drama or anger, just clarity, makes you a threat. What do you think I should do? Claire asked, her voice calm. Elizabeth tilted her head slightly, as if weighing how much of the truth she should say. You have two options, she said slowly. 1. Stay on the current path, build alliances, persuade people one by one, and let Anna work against you behind the scenes. Or 2. Bring her in. Offer her a role that appears central but is actually embedded within a structure you control. Claire frowned. A reluctant ally? Call it co-ownership strategy. When people believe they own part of something, they resist it less. You could give Anna a role in the mentoring program. Let her choose some mentors, just enough to feel she has a say. Claire leaned back, silent. The idea wasn't new, but executing it within a place like Volker and Strauss was another matter entirely. And more than that, was she willing to share the board with someone who had tried to push her out of her airplane seat? Have you done it before? Claire asked, eyes fixed on Elizabeth. The older woman smiled, not a victorious smile, but the kind worn by someone who's fought many battles without needing to flaunt her scars. I've let people think they were driving the car when I was the one designing the road. Claire didn't smile back, but she understood. Outside the window, sunlight began to pierce the thinning clouds. A beam struck the table, making Elizabeth's espresso glow like a tiny spotlight on a quiet stage. "So," Claire asked, not evasively, "are you on my side?" Elizabeth nodded, slow, steady. "I'm on the side of real change. And I believe you can make it happen. But you'll need to be smart. And forgiving, especially toward those who've grown too used to holding power." Claire picked up her coffee, took a sip. Bitter, but not unpleasant. "All right," she said, looking out at the garden where rain still glistened on the stone figures like ideas not yet spoken. "I'll let Anna Weiss have a small piece of the model. But the core stays untouched." Elizabeth nodded. "I'll arrange a three-way meeting. But you'll lead. One last thing, be wary of those who don't show resistance. They're often more dangerous than those who do." Claire stood with Elizabeth. There was no handshake, no formal agreement. A consensus had been reached, not in signatures but in the quiet understanding between two women who knew how to win without being allowed to fail. As Claire stepped out of the cafe, the rain had stopped. The city felt quieter, moving to a new rhythm. She wasn't tense, only alert, like someone who had just passed through the first gate. The silent gate, guarded by those who truly hold power. She unlocked her phone and typed a quick message to Julian Becker. "Phase 2 begins. Prep the mentoring group. I'll offer Anna a controlled share." Message sent. As Claire walked back to the hotel, a breeze ran through her hair, like a soft pat from the future. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. in the Edelstein Room on the 28th floor, a smaller space than the usual conference venues at Volcker and Strauss, but no less commanding. Sleek black leather chairs, a long oak table, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a misty skyline of Frankfurt. The room felt like a stage, one designed to ensure no one could hide from themselves. Claire arrived 10 minutes early. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood by the window, gazing down at the stream of people below, tiny, nameless dots in motion. But her focus wasn't on the view. It was on restructuring her tactical approach. Limit, open, lead, withdraw. The 4 steps of any informal power negotiation. Right on time. The door opened. Anna Weiss entered first. Claire noticed the ash-gray suit, plain, precise, with a silver lily brooch, a subtle marker often worn by those striving to project unshakable professionalism. Anna didn't look at Claire right away. She adjusted her collar in the mirrored glass. Elizabeth Kramer followed. No smile. No words. Just a quiet nod inviting both women to sit. Once they were settled, Elizabeth opened the conversation. "I believe we all understand the purpose of today's meeting. Claire has proposed an internal mentoring program as a pillar of the broader inclusion strategy. She's invited Anna to co-develop this component. This is an opportunity for collaboration if both sides can agree on roles and boundaries." She glanced at Claire, signaling her to continue. Claire gave a slight nod, adjusting her tone to land with clarity but not force. "I believe the success of any mentoring program rests on 3 things: the quality of the mentors, a transparent evaluation system, and meaningful engagement from mid-level leadership." She turned to Anna, her gaze steady and composed. "I know you've led many leadership development initiatives at Volcker. That experience and your credibility are valuable. That's why I'd like to invite you to co-design the mentor selection and training model. I'll oversee the framework and evaluation. But the selection of participants, I propose leaving that to you." Silence. Anna sat upright, hands lightly clasped. Her eyes studied Claire for several long seconds, not a reflexive look, but an intentional reading. Then she spoke. "Interesting. You invite me into a program I had no say in shaping from the start and then limit me to selecting people." Her voice wasn't raised, but it was cool and even, like the sound of glass cracking underfoot. Claire didn't flinch. "I don't see it as a limitation. I see it as strategic influence. The people you choose will shape the culture of mentoring across this organization. That's real power." Anna tilted her head. "And I'm supposed to believe that the framework and evaluation will be entirely objective?" Claire offered a smile, not defiant, but inviting. "I believe in transparency. All metrics, participation rates, mentee feedback, retention indicators will be shared with both of us. We'll monitor them together. And if anything's off, I'm open to adjustments." Elizabeth stepped in, right on cue. "I'm happy to serve as an independent overseer if needed. Both of you bring strengths. If we align them, we could build a model that leads the way for the German finance sector." Anna was quiet for another moment, but the silence had changed. It was no longer resistance, it was calculation. At last, she said evenly, "I agree with 2 conditions. I want to propose 3 names outside the current HR shortlist. And I want to be present alongside the COO for the mid-program evaluation." Elizabeth nodded. "That's acceptable." Claire nodded too, without hesitation. I welcome the input. No one smiled. But the temperature in the room had shifted from cold confrontation to the tentative warmth of a cautious truce. The meeting ended after 45 minutes. Elizabeth was the first to leave. Anna stood more slowly, adjusted her coat buttons, then stepped toward Claire. I won't pretend we're aligned, she said. Claire tilted her head slightly, answering calmly. I'm not here for alignment. I'm here for effectiveness. Anna pressed her lips together, unclear if to suppress a smile or a comment. I used to think you didn't understand the system, she murmured. Now I see you understand it far too well. And you? Claire asked softly. Anna didn't answer, but as she reached the door, she paused, turning back slightly. Don't stay too alone, Moreau. This tower gets cold. The door clicked shut behind her, like a sentence left unfinished. Claire remained alone, not victorious, not defeated, but she had placed a piece on the board and forced someone else to make a move. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Message from Julian Becker. Heard Ms. Weiss just left the 28th floor without slamming the door. Should I start printing the mentoring team new edition cards? Claire typed back. Start printing, but leave one seat blank. Not for a guest, but for someone who once didn't want to be in the room. Message sent. She turned back to the window. Frankfurt was bathed in gentle light. Below, the city moved. Quiet, unhurried, but unstoppable. She knew this was only the prelude. Monday morning, the first week of March. The new mentoring system at Volcker and Strauss officially launched. Within 2 weeks, Claire and the internal team had selected 10 mentors from various departments. 5 nominated by HR, 5 chosen through expanded recommendations from Julian and a group of independent team leads. The opening event was held in the ground floor auditorium. It was unpretentious. A simple backdrop bearing the slogan "Change doesn't come from policy, but from relationship," with chairs arranged in a semicircle to encourage dialogue. Claire stood at the podium, no script in hand. She looked at the 10 people seated in the front row, diverse in age, gender, and skin color, and began. Mentoring is the gentlest political act an organization can make. The room went quiet. Eyes turned toward her. She continued, her voice steady and warm, because mentoring isn't just about showing the way. It's the recognition that someone isn't alone. It's the willingness to share power without losing it. And here at Volcker and Strauss, we're learning to divide, to multiply. Applause rose, not forced, not polite. The people in the room weren't just listening. They understood. After the introduction, the program moved into its first workshop session. Claire stepped back, taking a seat near the back to observe. Who listened attentively, who dominated the conversation, who avoided eye contact. The smallest cues often spoke the loudest. Anna Weiss was there too. She sat in the front row, nodding at the appropriate moments, composed as though grading an exam. When the mentors began sharing their reflections, Anna said nothing. But Claire noticed. She took notes rapidly, and always paused when someone said something that might be deemed controversial. Claire didn't yet know how Anna would use those notes, but instinct told her. Anna didn't act without purpose. The launch ended smoothly. That evening, Claire's inbox filled with thank you notes and expressions of enthusiasm. Everything seemed calm, and that was what made her uneasy. 2 days later, Claire was working with the people analytics team on the 12th floor when Julian Becker called. His voice was low, quiet, and different. Got a minute? I'm reviewing the mentoring feedback data. What's up? That's the thing. The feedback is the problem. He hesitated. The internal HR system, the one storing anonymous responses, shows irregularities. Irregularities. Some mentee responses have been reclassified as internal-only documents. They're now inaccessible to you, and a few entries were trimmed. But here's the twist. It wasn't Anna. Claire paused. Then who? Hannes Laber, deputy head of IT. You haven't met him in any meetings, but he built the internal platform for the mentoring program. Claire pressed her hand to her desk. Hannes Laber, a name that had never stood out, which made it dangerous. Who's he taking orders from? Unclear. But guess who sponsored the mentoring tech stack last year? She didn't need to guess. Anna Weiss. That evening, Claire called Elizabeth Kramer. I need an urgent technical meeting on the mentoring feedback system. There are signs of data manipulation, and I want Hannes Labor present. Elizabeth didn't ask questions. She simply replied, Friday, 9 a.m., Eisenberg room. And to keep life from becoming too technical, later that night, a message popped up on Claire's phone while she was alone at the rooftop bar of her hotel. Matteo Klein. Just landed. Has Frankfurt warmed up yet? If you had an hour to kill, would you spend it talking or staying quiet together? Claire stared at the screen for a few seconds. After a long day, her mind felt fragile, like glaze over antique tiles. But Matteo's eyes appeared in her memory. Soft, unpressing. She replied, quiet, but with wine. 20 minutes later, they sat side by side, not facing each other, next to each other, as if even the space between them deserved to be preserved. Matteo didn't ask about the program. Claire didn't bring up Hannes. They simply looked out over the city, red wine glinting under soft light. After a while, Matteo spoke, without turning toward her. I don't believe in perfect fairness, but I do believe in the aesthetics of balance. Claire turned slightly, a small smile tugging at her lips. That sounds like something written in a bad poet's notebook. Matteo shrugged. I did write it. At 22. My professor called it pretentious and ungrounded. Claire laughed for the first time that day. The laughter stretched something inside her, like a taut string finally settling back in tune. When they stood to leave, Matteo placed a hand lightly on her back. Not possessive, just present. She didn't pull away, and in the elevator, neither spoke. But in the silence, Claire understood. Some battles are not fought in daylight. Some alliances form in the quiet, when no one's trying to prove anything. The next morning, Claire opened her email. A new report from the mentoring system awaited. Technical issues, still pending resolution. Hannes Labor not in office. Working remotely. Claire stared at the status. She knew this type of disappearance. It wasn't retreat. It was prelude to a counterattack. She called Julian. We need a backup of the original data, before it disappears. I did it last night. Sent you a private link. And Claire. Yes. Be careful. From now on, it's not just about mentoring. It's about controlling the feedback system, which means controlling the narrative. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them again. Then I'll write the narrative, even if I have to write it in blood. The Eisenberg room was located on the 5th floor, the technical floor of Volcker and Strauss. No glass walls, no oak floors, no leather chairs. Just ash-gray meeting tables, plain swivel chairs, and a medium-sized projector screen. An unremarkable room, yet precisely because of that, it was the true center of power, where systems were programmed, monitored, and when necessary, altered. Claire arrived early. She set up her laptop and connected the external hard drive Julian had sent the night before. Inside it, a backup of the original mentoring feedback, untouched, unfiltered. She opened 2 windows, one displaying data from the official system, the other showing Julian's raw extraction. On screen, the numbers looked out, but she knew they hid critical discrepancies. 9 o'clock sharp. The door opened. Hannes Labor walked in tall, slim, in a crisp white shirt tucked in, frameless glasses, and a gaze that suggested he was used to being mistrusted but had never been stopped. Elizabeth Kramer followed. As discreet as always, but Claire noticed, today she hadn't brought her iPad. A signal today she was here to listen. Shall we begin? Elizabeth asked. Claire nodded, turning her screen toward them. These are the feedback entries from the mentoring system, week 1, she said, pointing to the first column, light blue, uniform. And these are the entries from the backup Julian Becker pulled from the system cache just before the last update. She switched to the second window. A few cells lit up in red, data missing, blank, 0% response rate. Hannes frowned. I'm not sure what this comparison is trying to prove. Some duplicated entries might have been filtered due to interrupted sessions or network errors. Claire tilted her head. Then why is it that every missing response comes from MENS in the Women in Functional Transition support program? Nearly 100% of that group's feedback is gone. Other groups were unaffected. That's when Elizabeth spoke, clear and measured. Can you explain that specifically, Hannes? He didn't blink. It's possible the system temporarily tagged those ments into a separate classification pending review. We often label data as pending in the first week. Claire smiled, not smug, but deliberate. Strange. Because there's no mention of a pending label in the original IT protocol you gave me last week. The one you emailed me personally. The air slowed. Elizabeth turned slightly to look at Hannes, not hostile, but her gaze had lost all neutrality. You said the data wasn't deleted. So where is it now? Hannes shifted slightly, lowering his voice. Stored in a side repository within the sandbox environment. I can retrieve it if needed. It's needed, Claire said immediately. Right now. And I want to see the folder name. Elizabeth added. And I want to know who authorized the creation of that sandbox environment. A heavy pause. Then Hannes replied. The sandbox protocol was implemented as part of a security enhancement proposal submitted by HR last year. Specifically, Ms. Weiss. Claire leaned back. This wasn't unexpected. But now it was confirmed the mentoring system had been designed with the capability to filter out feedback that didn't align with organizational narrative. That meant if a mentee said their mentor didn't listen or if someone felt the program was performative and they happened to belong to a sensitive group like young female leaders, cross-functional transfers, or employees of color, their words could be silently buried. Claire turned to Elizabeth. I want all feedback made internally visible at minimum to myself, the COO, and the mentoring task force. And I want all data classification processes logged from this week forward. Elizabeth nodded. Agreed. Hannes, execute by end of day. Hannes's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Understood. When the meeting ended, Claire packed up slowly, waiting for the others to leave before standing. She knew Hannes wasn't the real problem. The real problem was who would be next to manipulate the system, only better. That night, back in her hotel room, Claire started a Zoom call with Julian. He appeared on-screen in a gray hoodie, a glass of water beside him. Do you think Anna knew what Hannes was doing? She asked. Julian nodded slightly. She knew. But she didn't give direct orders. This is classic, suggested but not said, structure. She creates the space. Others fill it the way they know she'd want. Claire closed her eyes for a second. We need to remove that possibility. Julian gave a wry smile. You planning to overthrow HR entirely? No, Claire opened her laptop, typing as she spoke. I'm going to publish selected feedback on the internal bulletin. Julian blinked. You'll do it yourself? Claire nodded. On the grounds of transparency and encouraging a culture of shared reflection. I'll quote the strongest lines from real voices. No names. Julian sighed. You're walking into the gray zone, Moreau. Claire looked directly into the camera. No. I'm pulling others out of it. Monday, 8:58 a.m. The internal newsletter of Volker and Strauss, Impulse Weekly, landed in the inboxes of over 700 employees across the Frankfurt headquarters and regional offices. Each week, the internal creativity corner typically featured harmless content, birthday greetings, photos from team-building events, or a feel-good interview with someone from accounting. This week was different. Right beneath the title Voices from the Hallways was a short introduction written and signed by Claire. When we talk about inclusion, it's not just about actions, it's about feelings. Mentoring isn't only about guiding someone forward. It's about pausing to listen. Below are anonymous reflections from participants of the first mentoring round. We believe that when an organization listens, it grows. 3 quotes followed, short, powerful, and impossible to ignore. For the first time, I spoke with someone in management who didn't judge me for not having a linear career. I didn't know a mentor could say, I was doubted too. I felt seen. I wish I'd heard words like that 10 years earlier. No names, no departments, no blame. And precisely because of that, everyone saw themselves in it. By 10:15, the internal comms team informed Elizabeth Kramer that the post had reached the highest open rate in 18 months, 76%. A record. By 11:30, Claire received a direct email from CEO Richard Volker. This week's post was timely and necessary. We need to show that Volker doesn't just have a strategy, but a heart. Well done. Claire didn't smile. Not because she wasn't pleased, but because she knew others wouldn't be. And right on cue at 14:07, A call from Anna Weiss appeared on her screen. Claire waited until the third ring to answer. Ms. Moreau. Anna's voice was steady, but slower this time, like a knife carefully being sharpened. Speaking. This morning's post. I take it you didn't seek approval before publishing internal feedback? I removed all personal data. These are feelings, not accusations. No names. But it implies that your program is having some sort of miraculous effect. Claire exhaled softly. If the effect is that people want to keep participating, then I'm happy to be misunderstood. Silence on the line for a few beats. You're steering the narrative, Claire. And you know it. This time, Claire's voice was clearer. I'm not steering. I'm making space for voices that were too afraid to speak. Anna didn't respond immediately. Then calmly, very well. If you want to play this way, you should remember. Silence doesn't mean inactivity. She hung up. Claire stared at the screen. Anna's soft tone was always a warning. No shouting, no direct resistance. Just empty space, waiting for her to slip. That afternoon, as Claire was preparing for the Week 2 mentoring report, a message came in from Julian. Odd thing, a group of legal team leads just had a closed-door meeting with IT, not on the official calendar. Should I be worried? Claire typed back. Don't worry, just observe. A minute later, she followed up. And see which neutral players are starting to shift color. Julian responded in 10 seconds. Some are suddenly interested in mentoring after this morning's post. One of them, Otto Reinhardt, head of risk evaluation. Usually silent. Today he asked if he could join round 2. Claire nodded to herself. When light spreads, some retreat into shadow, but others rise from it. That night, Claire opened her laptop and began writing her digital journal. A habit she had kept since her student days in Paris, living in a 16-square-meter room near the Seine. Day 19. The program is creating real momentum for the first time. But it's also the first time I feel like I'm losing control of how fast it's growing. Success always triggers a redistribution of power. And in any organization, whoever controls the story controls the future. But if I start thinking only in terms of control, am I any different from them? How do I preserve the original spirit when what I've built is now moving faster than I ever planned? She typed the final period, then sat for a long time, eyes fixed on the screen. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she did and was asking herself whether she was willing to pay the price for it. Frankfurt wasn't colder than usual, but that morning, Claire felt something shift. The atmosphere in the office had changed. Like in a cathedral where no one speaks loudly, but everyone senses something important is unfolding, something not easy to walk away from. She walked into the meeting room on the 11th floor, where Otto Reinhardt was already waiting. Otto wasn't a man of slogans, but his eyes had a quiet light, not blind faith, but calm conviction that he could finally contribute to something that felt right. There were no pleasantries, no posturing. Otto simply made his proposal. Expand the mentoring program into a cross-departmental, flexible model, allowing non-managers with real insight to mentor peers from other teams. Mentoring that cut across the formal hierarchy. Claire remained silent throughout, not out of doubt, but because she was studying every word, like a chess player surveying the board from the opponent's side. Otto ended with a single, grounded sentence. If this organization wants real inclusion, it must believe that influence doesn't come only from titles, but from lived experience, past failures, and the courage to listen. Claire smiled, not to signal agreement, but in recognition. Here was someone who had thought about this for a long time, just waiting for permission to say it. She nodded. Let's try. 3 days later, the pilot for interdepartmental flexible mentoring was circulated internally. No press release, no CEO email, no new logo, just one line. Mentoring is not a project. It's a culture. If you want to learn or be heard, sign up. Within 36 hours, over 120 people submitted their forms, including names Claire never expected. A legal documentation specialist with 18 years of service. A front desk staffer long praised by internal clients. a soft-spoken but razor-sharp data analyst. No one asked if they were senior enough. They only asked, "What can I share?" The following week, a closed meeting was called among department heads to assess cultural risk from the new program. Claire was invited not to defend it but to listen. She stood at the far end of the table. No PowerPoint, just a black leather notebook. When some questioned the program's formality or its threat to leadership structure, Claire didn't counter directly. She told 3 short stories. A mentee, once too timid to speak up in meetings, submitted a proposal to the board after 2 weeks. A mentor with no title, just a document clerk, helped an intern become the quarter's top data contributor. A former department head, often seen as rigid, volunteered to guide a career-switching newcomer because he wanted to pass on the mistakes I once made. The room fell silent. Claire closed with a single line. "I'm not asking the organization to change its system. I'm just opening a door. Whoever wants to walk through it, I'll be waiting there." No one objected. No applause either. But as people left, one by one, Claire knew they'd heard her. A week later, an internal email from CEO Richard Volker, short and quiet. "Thank you to Claire Moreau for reminding us that sometimes culture doesn't begin with strategy, but with one person willing to listen." Claire read that message aboard a train to Brussels, en route to speak at a leadership forum on organizational transformation. Her talk had no dramatic title, no rallying slogans, just this: "I don't believe one person can change an organization, but I believe one person can make an organization ask itself, why haven't we done this before?" As the train crossed the border, German rooftops gave way to Belgian fields. Claire felt no victory, no fatigue, just one thing: peace. Peace in knowing she had done her part. That if someone, a woman, a foreigner, someone deemed too confident, entered that system tomorrow, they wouldn't have to start from zero, because the hallway had been cleared. The door cracked open, and there was a place waiting. The mentoring program hadn't changed the world, but it had changed how ordinary people saw each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin. Claire leaned her head against the train window, eyes half closed. Not the end, just the first time. She no longer had to stay alert, to hold her place.